Steve Harvey had hosted Family Feud for over 14 years, bringing joy and laughter to millions of families across America. Throughout his tenure, he had witnessed countless heartwarming moments, unexpected surprises, and genuine displays of human kindness that reminded him why he loved his work. But nothing could have prepared him for what would unfold on a Thursday afternoon in November 2024, when a simple handshake would expose the ugliest kind of prejudice and force Steve to make one of the most difficult decisions of his career. This is a story about dignity, respect, and the courage to stand up against racism even when it means stopping everything to address what should never have happened in the first place. If you believe that every person deserves to be treated with basic human respect, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel, because what happened next will show you why some moments matter more than any game or prize. The Williams family from Chicago, Illinois, stood on one side of the Family Feud stage, their presence radiating warmth, intelligence, and quiet confidence. The family was led by Dr. Michael Williams, a 55-year-old cardiologist who had spent 3 decades saving lives at one of Chicago's most respected hospitals. His wife, Patricia Williams, was a professor of literature at Northwestern University, where she had taught for 27 years and mentored hundreds of students who went on to successful careers. Their children stood beside them with equal accomplishment. Their eldest daughter, Jasmine, was a civil rights attorney who had argued cases before federal courts. Their son, David, was an aerospace engineer working on satellite technology. Their youngest, Nicole, was completing her doctorate in environmental science. This was a family that represented excellence, achievement, and the very best of what dedication and hard work could accomplish. The Williams family was African American, and they carried themselves with the particular dignity that comes from knowing you have to be twice as good to be considered half as worthy in a society that still harbors deep prejudices. Dr. Williams had navigated the challenges of being a black physician in predominantly white medical institutions, facing assumptions about his competence and qualifications despite his impeccable credentials. Patricia had dealt with students and colleagues who questioned whether she deserved her position, whether her scholarly work was truly rigorous, whether her achievements were the result of merit or affirmative action. Their children had all faced similar challenges in their respective fields, learning early that their race would be both an indelible part of their identity and something that others would use to judge them before knowing anything else about them. On the opposite side of the stage stood the Henderson family from rural Georgia, led by 52-year-old Susan Henderson and her husband Robert. The Henderson family presented themselves as traditional, God-fearing people who valued family, hard work, and what they called old-fashioned values. Their adult children, all in their 20s and 30s, had remained close to home, working in the family's agricultural supply business and maintaining the tight-knit community connections that had defined their family for generations. On the surface, they appeared to be exactly the kind of wholesome American family that Family Feud loved to feature. Steve Harvey walked onto the stage with his characteristic energy and warmth, ready to facilitate another episode of friendly competition between two American families. He had reviewed both family introductions and was particularly impressed with the Williams family's remarkable achievements. He looked forward to highlighting Dr. Williams's life-saving work, Patricia's contributions to education, and the children's various accomplishments. The Williams family represented a narrative that Steve was always eager to share, the story of Black excellence that defied stereotypes and demonstrated what was possible when talent met opportunity. The game began with the usual excitement and competitive spirit. Both families demonstrated quick thinking and good knowledge of popular survey answers. The Williams family took an early lead, with Dr. Williams showing impressive recall and his children providing clever answers that reflected both intelligence and cultural awareness. The Henderson family remained competitive, and the game proceeded normally through the first 3 rounds. Steve engaged with both families between questions, asking about their backgrounds, and creating those moments of connection that made Family Feud such enduring entertainment. The moment that would change everything came during the transition to the 4th round. In Family Feud tradition, when new family members come up to play, it is customary for them to shake hands with their opponent before facing off at the buzzer. This simple gesture of sportsmanship and respect had been part of the show's format for decades, a small ritual that reinforced the friendly nature of the competition. It was such an ingrained part of the show that contestants rarely even thought about it. They simply extended their hands, shook, smiled, and prepared to compete. Nicole Williams, the youngest daughter who was completing her environmental science doctorate, stepped up to the podium for her turn. She had been excited all day, watching her family members play and waiting for her opportunity to contribute. She approached the center podium with a bright smile, extending her hand toward her opponent, Susan Henderson's daughter-in-law, a 34-year-old woman named Jennifer Henderson. The gesture was automatic, friendly, and completely in line with the show's traditions and basic human courtesy. What happened next occurred in slow motion for everyone watching. Jennifer Henderson looked at Nicole's extended hand, and her face underwent a transformation that was captured clearly by the cameras. Her expression shifted from the polite smile she had been wearing to something that could only be described as disgust. She visibly recoiled, pulling her body backward and away from Nicole. She did not simply decline the handshake. She made a show of her refusal, her body language broadcasting revulsion and contempt. Her hands retreated behind her back, and she turned her face away as if the mere proximity to Nicole was offensive. The studio audience gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck all the air out of the room. The other members of the Williams family, who had been cheering and encouraging Nicole moments before, froze in shock and hurt. Dr. Williams's face showed a mixture of protective fury and profound sadness, the look of a father who had hoped his children might be spared the racism he had endured, but who knew that hope had just been shattered on national television. Patricia Williams reached for her husband's hand, her own eyes filling with tears. Jasmine and David moved closer to each other, their expressions hardening with controlled anger. But it was Nicole's face that broke everyone's heart. The bright smile vanished, replaced by a look of such hurt and humiliation that several audience members began crying immediately. This was a young woman who had worked tirelessly to earn her doctorate, who had overcome countless obstacles in the male-dominated field of environmental science, who had dealt with racism throughout her academic career, but had maintained her optimism and faith in human goodness. In that moment, on national television, in what was supposed to be a fun family experience, she had been reduced to something Jennifer Henderson would not touch. Steve Harvey stopped completely. The game show host, who was known for his quick wit and ability to handle any situation, stood perfectly still, his expression showing a progression of emotions that millions of viewers would later analyze frame by frame. First came confusion, as his mind tried to process what his eyes had just witnessed. Then came recognition, the awful understanding of what had just happened and what it meant. Finally came a controlled fury so intense that everyone in the studio recognized they were witnessing something unprecedented. The cameras continued rolling as Steve slowly turned toward Jennifer Henderson. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet but carried throughout the studio with perfect clarity. Every word was weighted with the accumulated pain of a lifetime of experiencing and witnessing racism. Every syllable delivered with the moral authority of someone who had spent decades navigating a world that too often judged people by the color of their skin rather than the content of their character. "Ma'am, I need you to explain something to everyone here," Steve began, his eyes locked on Jennifer Henderson with an intensity that made her visibly uncomfortable. "I need you to explain why you just refused to shake this young woman's hand. I need you to tell all of us why you recoiled from her like she was diseased or dangerous. I need you to make it make sense, because from where I'm standing, what I just witnessed was pure, undiluted racism, and I want to give you an opportunity to tell me I'm wrong." Jennifer Henderson's face flushed red, and she stammered, trying to formulate a response that would explain away what everyone had clearly seen. She claimed she was a germaphobe, that she did not shake anyone's hands, that this had nothing to do with race. Her excuses came fast and desperate, each one more transparent than the last. Steve did not interrupt, allowing her to dig herself deeper with every word, giving her every chance to show the audience and viewers at home exactly what kind of person she was beneath the veneer of politeness. When Jennifer finally stopped talking, Steve turned to address the camera operators. "Stop the cameras," he said firmly. "Stop everything. We are not continuing this game until we address what just happened here." The production team hesitated, uncertain whether Steve was serious or whether this was some kind of improvisation that would resolve itself. But Steve's expression left no room for doubt. "I said stop the cameras, now." The cameras did not stop rolling entirely, but the taping was officially paused as Steve made a decision that would reverberate throughout the television industry. Steve walked directly to Nicole Williams, who stood at the podium with tears streaming down her face, her body language showing someone who wanted to disappear. He approached her gently, and when he spoke to her, his voice was filled with compassion and fatherly concern. "Sweetheart, I am so sorry," Steve said, his own voice breaking with emotion. What just happened to you is wrong. It is hateful, it is racist, and it should never have happened, especially not here, especially not in a place that is supposed to be about celebrating families and bringing people together. Nicole tried to maintain her composure, but the tears continued to flow. Mr. Harvey, I just wanted to play the game with my family. I just wanted to have fun. I don't understand why she wouldn't even touch my hand. What did I do wrong? Steve's response to her question would become one of the most powerful moments in television history. He gently took both of Nicole's hands in his, demonstrating the basic human gesture that Jennifer Henderson had refused to extend. Listen to me very carefully, Steve said, looking directly into Nicole's eyes. You did nothing wrong. Do you hear me? Nothing. You extended your hand in friendship and sportsmanship exactly as you were supposed to do. The problem is not with you. The problem is with racism, with prejudice, with the poison that makes some people believe they are too good to touch another human being because of the color of their skin. Steve turned to address the entire Williams family, all of whom were now gathered around Nicole in a protective circle. What he said next would be quoted in articles, shared on social media, and studied in communications courses as an example of how to use a platform for moral leadership. Dr. Williams, Mrs. Williams, Jasmine, David, Nicole, I want you to know something. Your family represents everything that is excellent and admirable. You are a cardiologist who saves lives every single day. You are a professor who shapes minds and inspires students. You are an attorney fighting for civil rights and justice. You are an engineer advancing technology. You are a scientist working to protect our environment. Your accomplishments are extraordinary, your contributions to society are immeasurable, and your dignity in this moment is humbling. Steve's voice grew stronger as he continued. What happened here today is not about you. It is about the sickness of racism that still infects our society. It is about people who judge others based on melanin rather than merit, who see skin color before they see humanity, who carry hate in their hearts, and think they can disguise it as personal preference or religious conviction or whatever excuse makes them feel better about their bigotry. Then Steve turned to face the Henderson family, and the warmth that had filled his voice when speaking to the Williams family disappeared completely, replaced by steel and uncompromising moral clarity. As for you, Steve said, addressing the Henderson family but looking specifically at Jennifer and her husband, you need to understand something very clearly. What just happened crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed. This young woman did nothing except extend her hand in friendship and sportsmanship. She was following the traditions of this show and demonstrating basic human courtesy. And your daughter-in-law responded by treating her like she was contaminated. Jennifer's husband, standing beside her, tried to defend his wife, claiming that Steve was making assumptions, that they were not racist, that they had black friends and employees. His defense only made things worse, revealing the depth of their failure to understand the gravity of what had occurred. Steve raised his hand to silence him. Sir, I don't want to hear about your black employees or your black friends. I want to address the fact that your wife just humiliated a brilliant young scientist on national television because she is black. That is the only possible explanation for what we all witnessed. It was not about germs, because if it were, she would have stated that before approaching the podium and would have refused to shake anyone's hand, including her own family members. It was not about personal space, because she had no problem standing close to everyone else. It was about racism, pure and simple. Steve made a decision in that moment that would have far-reaching consequences. He announced that the Henderson family's participation in the game was over, that they would be leaving the stage immediately, and that the Williams family would be declared the winners by default. More importantly, he made it clear that this episode would air in its entirety, including the incident and his response, because the world needed to see that racism was still alive, and that it would not be tolerated on his stage. The Henderson family protested, with Susan Henderson claiming they were being treated unfairly, that their Christian values were being attacked, that they had rights and could not be discriminated against for their beliefs. Her protest revealed everything that needed to be known about how they viewed the situation. In their minds, they were the victims, persecuted for their beliefs rather than held accountable for their racism. Steve's response was swift and decisive. Ma'am, you have the right to your beliefs, but you do not have the right to use those beliefs as an excuse to dehumanize other people. You do not have the right to participate on this show if you cannot treat all contestants with basic human dignity and respect. The Williams family came here to compete, to have fun, to celebrate their bonds. Your family came here carrying prejudice and hatred, and when it was exposed, you doubled down instead of acknowledging the harm you caused. You need to leave. Now. Security personnel arrived to escort the Henderson family from the studio. As they departed, Susan Henderson made one final comment that the microphones caught clearly. She muttered something about how the world had changed too much, how people could not even hold to their values anymore without being persecuted. Her comment crystallized everything that was wrong with her worldview. She genuinely believed that refusing to shake a black woman's hand was a value worth defending, a principle worth standing by. After the Henderson family left, Steve spent considerable time with the Williams family, particularly with Nicole, ensuring they felt supported and valued. The production team paused the official taping to allow everyone to process what had happened and to decide how to proceed. The producers, to their credit, agreed immediately with Steve's decision to air the incident. They recognized that while it would be controversial, it was also an opportunity to address racism directly and to demonstrate that such behavior had no place in their programming. During this extended break, Dr. Williams spoke with Steve about their family's experiences with racism. His words carried the weight of decades of navigating a world where his competence was constantly questioned, and his achievements were often attributed to something other than merit. Mr. Harvey, my children have heard me talk about the racism I experienced when I was starting my medical career, Dr. Williams said, his voice heavy with emotion. I told them about the patients who refused to let me treat them, who demanded a white doctor even though I was the most qualified person available. I told them about the colleagues who assumed I was an orderly or a janitor rather than a physician. I told them these stories hoping they would be historical accounts, things from the past that they would never have to experience themselves. But what happened to Nicole today reminded me that we have not come as far as I hoped. The racism is still here. It just wears different masks. Patricia Williams added her own perspective as an educator. I teach literature, including works by Black authors that examine racism and its impact on individuals and communities. I analyze these themes with my students, help them understand the psychological and emotional toll of being treated as less than human. But it is different when it happens to your child, when you watch your brilliant, accomplished daughter be reduced to something another person will not touch. No amount of academic analysis prepares you for that pain. Jasmine Williams, the civil rights attorney, spoke about how this incident connected to broader patterns of discrimination. In my work, I see racism every day. I see it in the justice system, in housing discrimination, in employment practices. But I also see it in these small moments, these personal interactions where people reveal their prejudices. What happened today was not an isolated incident. It was a manifestation of a belief system that says some people are inherently better than others based on race. That belief system has to be confronted wherever it appears, whether in a courtroom or on a game show stage. Steve listened to each family member, and their testimonies reinforced his conviction that he had made the right decision. He shared with them his own experiences with racism throughout his career, the doors that had been closed to him, the opportunities he had been denied, the assumptions people had made about his capabilities and character based solely on his appearance. The decision was made to continue the taping with the Williams family competing in a special format. Rather than bringing in another family to compete against them, the production team created a unique episode where the Williams family would participate in multiple rounds of questions, showcasing their knowledge and celebrating their family bonds without the competitive element. Steve announced that all prize money they won would be multiplied, and additionally, he personally would donate to a scholarship fund in Nicole's name specifically for Black women pursuing careers in STEM fields. The remainder of the taping became a celebration of the Williams family and everything they represented. Steve asked each family member about their work and their achievements, giving them a platform to share their stories and their passions. Dr. Williams talked about the importance of diversity in medicine and how having doctors from different backgrounds leads to better health outcomes for all patients. Patricia discussed the value of diverse voices in literature and academia. Jasmine spoke about her civil rights work and her commitment to fighting for justice. David shared his excitement about the aerospace technology he was developing. And Nicole, despite the pain she had just experienced, talked about her environmental research and her hopes for creating a more sustainable future. When the episode aired 3 weeks later, it became the most watched episode in Family Feud history. The network made the decision to air it during prime time with a special introduction that provided context and warned viewers about the serious nature of what they were about to witness. They included resources for viewers who wanted to learn more about confronting racism and supporting organizations working on racial justice. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Millions of people praised Steve Harvey for his moral courage and his passionate defense of the Williams family. Social media exploded with messages of support, with people sharing their own experiences of being treated as untouchable or unworthy because of their race. Civil rights organizations commended Steve for using his platform to address racism directly rather than smoothing over the incident or editing it out. Nicole Williams received an outpouring of support from scientists, educators, and activists around the world. Many successful Black women in STEM fields reached out to share their own stories of discrimination and to encourage Nicole to continue her important work. Several major universities invited her to speak about her research and her experience, and she used these platforms to discuss both environmental science and the importance of creating inclusive academic environments. The scholarship fund that Steve established in Nicole's name grew exponentially as donations poured in from individuals and organizations who wanted to support Black women in science. Within the first year, the fund provided full scholarships to 25 students pursuing degrees in environmental science, engineering, and related fields. Each recipient was invited to meet Nicole, creating mentorship relationships that extended far beyond financial support. However, there was also significant backlash, revealing the deep divisions in American society around issues of race and accountability. Some viewers accused Steve of overreacting, of making too big a deal out of what they characterized as a personal choice not to shake hands. Some defended the Henderson family's rights to their beliefs and criticized what they saw as intolerance of Christian values. These responses were instructive, demonstrating how many people genuinely did not understand that refusing to touch someone because of their race was indefensible discrimination rather than a protected personal preference. Steve addressed the criticism in multiple interviews, never wavering from his position. He explained that religious freedom did not include the freedom to discriminate against others, that personal beliefs could not be used as weapons to dehumanize people. He pointed out that the same arguments being made to defend the Henderson family had been used throughout history to justify slavery, segregation, and countless other atrocities. He made it clear that there was no middle ground on this issue, no both sides to consider. Racism was wrong, full stop, and refusing to touch someone because of their skin color was racism, regardless of what justification someone tried to attach to it. The Henderson family initially remained defiant, giving interviews where they claimed they were the real victims of discrimination. Jennifer Henderson maintained that she had the right not to shake anyone's hand for any reason, and that being forced to do so would violate her personal autonomy. Her arguments revealed a stunning lack of self-awareness about the difference between being asked to extend basic courtesy to another human being and being subjected to dehumanization because of one's race. However, as the backlash against them intensified, as their employers and community members began distancing themselves from their views, the Henderson family's tone began to shift. Several months after the incident, they issued a public statement acknowledging that their behavior had been hurtful and wrong. Whether this represented genuine growth or damage control remained a matter of debate, but at minimum, they had been forced to confront the consequences of their actions. The incident sparked a broader conversation about what constitutes racism in contemporary America. Many people, particularly white Americans, had become comfortable with the idea that racism was something overt and intentional, something done by bad people who wore hoods or used slurs. The Henderson family incident forced a reckoning with the reality that racism also manifests in smaller moments, in body language and facial expressions, in the refusal to extend basic human courtesy. These microaggressions, as scholars call them, are no less damaging for being subtle, and in many ways they are more insidious because they are easier to deny and harder to confront. Educational institutions began using the incident as a teaching tool. Teachers showed the footage in classes discussing civil rights, social psychology, and interpersonal communication. The incident illustrated concepts like implicit bias, dehumanization, and the importance of active anti-racism. Students analyzed Jennifer Henderson's body language, the Williams family's response, and Steve Harvey's intervention, examining what each revealed about attitudes toward race and how to effectively confront discrimination. 1 year after the incident, the Williams family was invited back to Family Feud for a special anniversary episode. This time, the atmosphere was purely celebratory. Steve welcomed them with genuine warmth and affection, and the episode became a platform for highlighting everything the family had accomplished in the year since their original appearance. Nicole shared that while the incident had been painful, it had ultimately strengthened her resolve to succeed and to use her platform to make a difference. She had completed her doctorate with distinction and had accepted a position as an assistant professor at a major research university. She was using her research to address environmental justice issues, focusing on how pollution and climate change disproportionately affect communities of color. The scholarship fund in her name had grown substantially and was making a real difference in the lives of young Black women pursuing STEM careers. Dr. Williams reported that the incident had inspired him to become more active in addressing healthcare disparities and advocating for diversity in medicine. He had started a mentoring program for Black medical students and residents, helping them navigate the challenges they would face in their careers. Patricia had incorporated discussions of the incident into her curriculum, using it to explore themes of dignity, resistance, and resilience in African American literature and culture. The most moving moment of the anniversary episode came when Steve presented the Williams family with a special award recognizing their grace, dignity, and commitment to using their platform for positive change. As he presented the award, Steve reflected on what the incident had taught him about the responsibility that comes with having a platform and a voice. "When that moment happened a year ago," Steve said, "I had a choice. I could have smoothed it over, minimized it, tried to keep the show moving and deal with it behind the scenes. That would have been easier, more comfortable, less controversial. But I looked at Nicole's face. I saw the pain and humiliation she was experiencing, and I knew that staying silent would be its own form of participation in her dehumanization. I knew that every Black person watching needed to see someone stand up and say clearly that what happened was wrong, that it would not be tolerated, that their dignity and humanity mattered more than ratings or comfort or avoiding controversy." The Williams family's story continued to resonate and inspire long after the cameras stopped rolling. The incident became part of a larger cultural conversation about how to confront racism in everyday situations, how to support people who experience discrimination, and how to create a society where every person is treated with the basic dignity and respect they deserve as human beings. 3 years after the original incident, a documentary was produced examining the event and its aftermath. The documentary featured interviews with the Williams family, Steve Harvey, civil rights scholars, psychologists who studied discrimination, and dozens of people whose lives had been touched by the story. It explored the history of dehumanization and the various ways racism manifests in interpersonal interactions. It examined the psychological impact of being treated as untouchable and the broader social consequences of allowing such behavior to go unchallenged. The documentary also highlighted the positive changes that had resulted from the incident. The scholarship fund had grown into a major foundation supporting Black women in STEM fields across the country. Nicole Williams had become a prominent voice for environmental justice and an inspiration to young scientists. The incident had sparked policy changes at several networks regarding how to handle discrimination on set and how to support contestants who experience bias. It had inspired countless individuals to confront racism when they witnessed it rather than remaining silent bystanders. The lesson that emerged from this story was both simple and profound. Racism persists not because of dramatic acts of hatred, though those certainly occur, but because of the accumulation of smaller moments where people are treated as less than human. It persists when someone refuses to shake a hand, when someone assumes incompetence based on appearance, when someone treats another person as untouchable or unworthy. Confronting racism requires vigilance in these everyday moments, willingness to make people uncomfortable by naming what is happening, and courage to prioritize human dignity over social harmony. Steve Harvey's decision to stop the show and address what happened became a model for how to use a platform responsibly. He demonstrated that sometimes the most important thing you can do is interrupt business as usual to address an injustice, even when it is costly or controversial. He showed that defending human dignity is not a partisan issue or a matter of opinion, but a moral imperative that transcends entertainment, ratings, or commercial considerations. The Williams family's grace throughout the ordeal provided a different kind of lesson. They could have responded with anger, bitterness, or withdrawal. Instead, they channeled their pain into purpose, using their experience to create opportunities for others and to advance important conversations about race and justice. They demonstrated that dignity is not something that can be taken away by another person's hatred. but rather something that comes from within and is strengthened by how we respond to adversity. For Nicole Williams specifically, the young woman who had been directly targeted by Jennifer Henderson's refusal, the journey from humiliation to empowerment was profound. She spoke about it in interviews years later, reflecting on how that painful moment had become a catalyst for growth and purpose. "When she refused to touch my hand, I felt small, dirty, unworthy," Nicole said. "But then Mr. Harvey stopped everything to defend me. My family surrounded me with love, and millions of strangers reached out to support me. I realized that what happened said nothing about my worth and everything about the sickness of racism. I also realized that I had a responsibility to use my platform to fight for a world where no young black girl would ever have to question her worth because of the color of her skin." As this remarkable story draws to a close, the ultimate message is one of hope tempered with realism. The incident on Family Feud did not end racism or solve the deep-seated problems of prejudice and discrimination that continue to affect millions of people. But it did demonstrate that change is possible when people with platforms use them responsibly, when families respond to pain with purpose, and when ordinary moments become opportunities for moral clarity and courageous action. The simple act of refusing to shake someone's hand might seem trivial to those who have never been treated as untouchable. But for those who have experienced that particular form of dehumanization, who carry the wound of being treated as contaminated or unworthy of basic human contact, it represents something far more significant. It represents the ongoing struggle for dignity, recognition, and equality. It represents the work that still needs to be done to create a society where every person is valued and respected regardless of the color of their skin. If this story moved you, if you believe that every human being deserves to be treated with basic dignity and respect, make sure to like and subscribe. These are the stories that remind us of both how far we still have to go and how much power we have to create change when we refuse to accept hatred and prejudice as normal or acceptable.